Well, thanks very much, Michael.
Let
me just begin by saying I'm grateful to Rose last week for not covering the inauguration in her reflection, because I did this on January the 20th, and it is entitled The Inauguration. In recent years, caused at least in part, if not in the main, by climate change, the world has become all too accustomed to so-called natural disasters. The term has become part of the modern lexicon of everyday language. In this, America, and more generally the Americas, are far from immune. What was once called the storm of the century has now become a far too commonplace phrase. But moving beyond the environment, on what was a beautiful day in Hollywood, marked by a clear blue sky, the occasional passing car, banks closed and stores boarded up, not in preparation for any natural disaster, but rather in anticipation of a right-wing extremist riot in the wake of a violent and deadly mob which had forced its way into the Capitol building just 2 weeks before, while a homeless man walked aimlessly across the street, oblivious to what was happening 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., where America had just inaugurated a new president. As I caught some of the ceremony on my television screen and later on my computer screen, it seemed the atmosphere there was much like the day in Hollywood, a quiet affair, muted not so much by the pandemic, but more by the aftermath of shock, akin to a natural disaster after the winds have finally blown through and the debris has fallen back down to the ground. All I saw of the departing president was footage of an aircraft disappearing into the cloud before the proceedings had even begun, as if banished to a lonely and self-inflicted exile. Somehow, peace had returned to the nation, with the only sound I heard being that of the office clock ticking steadily in the background. Have we in America, witnessed by the world, found ourselves emerging not from a natural disaster, but a political one, a country, though still enshrouded by disease, but with the feeling that somehow we have survived the storm, a whirlwind, something we can hope never to see again. It's hard to say, but somehow one can have a sense that the future, illustrated by the clear blue sky and the ticking clock, can and will be brighter. Nothing could have demonstrated this more than the glow of a young 22-year-old girl from Los Angeles called Amanda Gorman, who illumined not just the stage in Washington, but the wider and future stage of the world. Nothing could have been in more stark contrast to the rear end of that departing plane, heading away from the scene of its own carnage. I am not a political man. I am not even an American man. In both, I find comfort in being neutral, someone standing by. That is not to say I do not love America, seen in part through English eyes, though more, like the poet, through human eyes, the sense of patriotism giving way to the fuller understanding that this nation, indivisible and under God, nonetheless remains built upon stolen land. But on this day, with blue sky and ticking clock, the fresh and innocent face of that beautiful young African-American girl, her mature soul filled with equal measure of purity and radiance, what kind of aftermath to the tumult might we expect? To rebuild America is to rebuild ourselves, to arise bruised but intact from the debris, to reconnect ourselves with those things that remain, most of all our sense of being alive, of having come through an encounter few can have imagined would be this bad just 4 long years ago. Strangely, I feel well again. In the aftermath of disaster, we are all survivors. We share a common bond. Humanity has been washed down. We are reminded of something else, something other, even something greater than ourselves. Some might call it hope, others the future. Whatever it is, this optimism for the future has been restored, and this call from the new incoming president for unity rings clear and true in our ears. We need to hear it as we emerge from our bunkers, take down the boards from our protected retail stores and unlock the doors to our banks, reach out to the homeless, and resume the clattering sound of a nation back to work. The clock ever ticking in the background, white billowing clouds returning to our skies. Not so much to mark a new normal, but the renewed hope and vigor of a nation being restored to once again take its rightful place in the civilized world. Thank you.